Using a figured bass can really help you with your harmonic analysis, particularly in the Mozart, as the orchestration in the Mozart Requiem includes an organ continuo. The principles of figured bass writing are really very straightforward. Let's start off with some basic triads. If I take this first chord here, I've taken the chord of D minor as it's the tonic triad of the opening movement of the Mozart Requiem. So I've got my tonic triad of D minor, D, F and A, and as I've placed that chord there, you can see I've written it in root position. In the second bar, I've written that same D minor chord out. Now the F is in the bass, so it is in its first inversion. The third of the chord is now in the bass, and again the chord has been placed in the third bar. There's the D, F, but now the A is in the bass, so that fifth of the chord is in the bass, so that is in the second inversion. So how do our figured basses relate to that? In root position, a figuration for a root position is 5-3. So what do these mean? They simply mean a third and a fifth interval above the lowest sounding note. So in this chord, the D is the lowest sounding note. If I add a third, there's my F. If I add a fifth, there's my A. And it's as simple as that. But we don't tend to use 5-3. If we don't see anything at all, it is implied that a third and a fifth is above. So if you ever come across a section where there are no figures, we can assume that this is in root position because the third and the fifth are implied, as the majority of chords will be in root position. If you look at the first inversion chord, the figures that are used here are 6 and 3. Let's check those intervals. A third above this lowest note F is an A, there's the third, and the sixth above the F is a D. So there's our 6-3 chord, which is a good shorthand for first inversion. Again, the abbreviation of 6-3 is just to put 6. That third is implied. So if we see 6 on its own, we can assume that we are talking about a simple first inversion chord. And for the second inversion chord, if we check those intervals, a 6 and a 4, above the A, up a fourth to that D, and up a sixth to the F. And there is our 6-4 chord, and there's no abbreviation for that second inversion chord. If we go on to accidentals, let's look at how accidentals work. Occasionally you may see a single accidental appearing beneath a bass note. What would that indicate? If I employ the rule I mentioned above, the implication that no figures suggest that this is a tonic chord, then this will be my chord here. Okay, D, F and A, as was the case up there. That's the abbreviation. If we see an accidental, that means that that applies always to the third. Okay, that is what that indication would mean. That would change that triad, in this case, from D minor to D major. The sharp is telling the harpsichord or the organist, in this case, to sharpen the third note. You might think, why isn't it sharp third? Again, that is what is implied when we leave the third out. If we look in more detail, let's look at that here. So we look at this very complicated looking figuration. We've got a flat with nothing above it. So if we use that assumption from before, let's assume that that flat applies to the third. So let's add a third above. There's my flat third there, B flat. And then above that, I've got to add a flattened sixth. So sixth above a G is an E. And again, I have to flatten it. And there is the harmonization for those particular figures. So an accidental on its own refers to the third. If an interval is given, then you obviously use that accidental on that named interval there. This final example of the accidentals, sharp and the sixth next to it. So let's add a sharp sixth above, so that would be a C. And there's my sharp sixth there. Okay. I can add in what is implied underneath, which is normally a third, because as we use that original plan, a 6, we can assume it's a 6-3, so I can add the third in there. So that's how the accidentals will work on top of those basic triads. Now what about seventh chords? Here and I've already written these out to save time. There are 4 variations of a dominant 7th chord, and I've used the dominant 7th in this key of D minor. So I've got 4 A major chords with the added 7th, 4 A7 chords, A, C sharp, E and G. That chord in its root position there, A, C sharp, E and G, the intervals that are created are 7, the G, 5, the E, and 3, the C sharp. And of course what I should do for that is add in my sharp sign. Okay. Again, that can be abbreviated to 7, or, as we said, 7 sharp. I can add that sharp in to indicate that the third needs sharpening. If there was a C sharp in the key signature, then of course that accidental wouldn't be needed. Here, that same chord, A, C sharp, E and G, is now in its first inversion, the third is in the bass. The intervals that are created are a third, the E, the 5th, the G, and the A, the 6th, above that C sharp. So that's a 6-5-3 chord. That could be abbreviated to 6-5. So if you ever see 6-5, you know you're talking about in first inversion 7th chord. A second inversion 7th chord, which are more rare. Again, the E is in the bass here, so we've got a G, an A and a C sharp. So the intervals that are created, a third above is the G, a 4th above, which is the A, and a 6th above is the C sharp. Again, let's be correct, let's put that sharp in for the 6th. The abbreviated version of that is 4-3, but in this one we can't abbreviate it because I need to put the sharp in. If that was a C natural, as normal, then we'd get away with writing 4-3. So if you see 4-3 on its own or 6-4-3, we're talking about a 7th chord in second inversion. And of course we can have third inversion chords in this instance because the 7th could be in the bass, which is the case here. So the A, C sharp, E and G, the G is being placed in the bass here, and the triad above it, creating the intervals a 2nd, a 4th and a 6th. And again, there is the full figuration for that. There's the abbreviation 4-2, and in this case a sharpened 4-2 to indicate that C sharp. So the shorthand here, if you ever see 6, it's a first inversion chord. If you ever see 6-4, it's a second inversion chord. The accidentals speak for themselves largely. If you see a 7, it's a root position 7th chord. If you see 6-5, a first inversion 7th chord. 4-3, a second inversion 7th chord. And 4-2, a third inversion 7th chord. Really quick way of speeding up your harmonic analysis. And the last thing you may come across are suspensions. These tend to work fairly simply. Here I've got a chord of D minor, D, A and D, but the F isn't in here. Instead we've got a G. That G is the 4th, which is indicated there, which resolves to the 3. So you'll sometimes see a number with a dash and it will resolve either up or down. So here's an example of a 4-3 suspension indicated there in the figuration. The second example there, we've got a C major chord here, C, G and E. The D is the 9th above the C and it resolves to the octave C there. So this is an example of a 9-8 suspension. And the last example here, an example of a 7-6 suspension. There's our note F in the bass, a 7th above it would be E, resolves down to the D, the 6th. And the A goes in, that's the assumed interval, remember. Third is always the assumed interval, as was the case here, the E has been placed in there. So hopefully that will give you a little bit of an insight into how this figured bass works, and it really is a good way of helping you analyse the harmony in the Mozart and indeed any other scores where a figured bass and a basso continuo is present.